This is Dan Jurgens, and if you want to have a good time, keep listening to the Krypton Report.
Jason J. Lewis, the voice of Superman on Justice League Action, and you're listening to the Krypton Report.
Hi, this is David Patrick Wilson. I played Superman, Clark Kent, in the television production of It's a Bird, It's a Plane, enjoying every minute of being right here on the Krypton Report.
Welcome to the Krypton Report podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, the Superman of Blue. And today I have some special guests, two guys that I've kind of conversed with online for a little while, and I'll let them introduce themselves more directly, who fellow Superman podcasters, first time on the show. And what's neat is I'm actually recording today. I'm in my mobile setup in an old newspaper building. So there's a little bit of an echo because the room is empty, but it's the old office building of a newspaper. So it's really kind of exciting to be here. But I'm going to welcome my special guests, Mr. Rick, Lee, James, and David. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's very good to be with you, Tyler. Thank you.
Now, I would like you first let you guys explain your podcast and what it's about, because I find it really fascinating. So whichever one you wants to take it and roll with it.
Well, sure. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you having us on here today. And my name is Rick Lee James, and my co-host who's with me today is David Dalt. And David has been a friend for quite some time, which is where this podcast grew out of. And then he went from being a friend. We first met years ago on his radio show, actually, because he has a wonderful, it's a podcast, but it's also a show that goes out on public radio stations, and it's called Things Not Seen. And I had a new album out, and I had a book about the Psalms, and I was doing the full-time recording artist musician thing, and he brought me on, and we had a wonderful conversation. We've been friends since then. And then I enrolled to get my master's through Loyola University in Chicago through the Institute of Pastoral Studies, and David teaches there. And so he was my professor for a short time as well. So it's been an interesting and wonderful relationship. I knew he liked Superman a lot, and I know that every time I am with David, I learn something from him. So I am a hospital chaplain, and I meet with people in their hospital rooms all the time from various backgrounds. And I really appreciate conversations about spirituality. And this is where David comes in, because I feel like every time I speak with him, I learn something new. He has great insights. Sometimes he helps to reframe my thinking. And the show we just recorded, in fact, this past week, which is not released yet, that very thing happened. We had a wonderful conversation that started one place, and David kind of steered the ship and took us another. But that's a little bit about me. I'm a musician. I'm a chaplain. I'm a person with other podcasts and lots of things going on. And on Twitter, I am found Rick Lee James 4, but it's also called Superman Always. And on that page, I just post about Superman. So I'll let David just share a little bit about himself now, if I haven't already shared too much about him.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Rick. And I'll just say one other connecting factor was Rick also runs the Mr. Rogers Say Twitter feed. And we decided to start a podcast together about Mr. Rogers and the spirituality of Mr. Rogers called Welcome to the Neighborhood. And I have had so much fun talking to Rick over the years just about all of these subjects, that when he suggested that we do a Superman podcast, that's two of my favorite things, talking to Rick and talking about Superman. So that was just a wonderful thing. As a professor, I teach classes in spirituality and spiritual direction, but as a scholar, I do a lot of work on media and media criticism. So talking about comic books and talking about movies and radio shows and television shows is right up my alley. So very glad to be with you, Tyler, and always glad to be back with you, Rick. It's good, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And just one last final point about David. He is also an Emmy-nominated writer, so he has some experience in the television side of things as well, which makes him even more interesting, I think, in this conversation.
Well, that's awesome. What did you get nominated for, David?
There was a documentary called Selma at 50, Still Marching, which was produced in conjunction with with one of the local seminaries here in Chicago Theological Seminary. here in Chicago. And so that was just a chance to kind of revisit the civil rights movement 50 years later, and was very gratified to have that recognized by the Academy. And we didn't win, but I was so happy to be nominated.
That's awesome. That's truly a blessing. I'm glad to have you both here. As of this recording, you've released 2 episodes. Your most recent episode, like I said, episode 2, you talked about the Iron Giant, which
Yeah.
I love because I sent you guys a picture. I have the Iron Giant statue on my desk with the S he puts on, and my wife bought that for me years ago. And what's funny is, spoilers alert, but for our Thanksgiving special bonus episode this year, we are actually going to be doing a commentary on the Iron Giant.
That's terrific.
And, I've really enjoyed listening to your past 2 episodes. I went to Bible college. My brother and I did. He got his degree in youth ministry, and my degree is in psychology counseling. And then my master's degree is in screenwriting, and my minor is in theology and pastoral, like theology and everything. So it's really interesting to listen to you both talk, because a lot of your language and the way that you talk about things is I haven't heard or experienced in a long time, having, graduated from college almost 10 years ago.
Mm.
So it's really fascinating. Actually, it's been longer than 10 years when I say, yeah, dang, almost 15 years ago.
Amazing
But
how
it's
that
just-
happens, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So it's really like when I listen to you guys talk, I'm like, oh man, I just want to kind of jump in, because sometimes you don't have the always the conversation at that level or that rhetoric of theologically sound. Because I remember when I was in Bible school, I had a book. It was called it was basically comparing Superman to mythology, but also biblical mythology. And I had one professor kind of be like, that's stupid. And I was like, no, I think it's interesting when you study like the creators and where they pull from, and how so many times we create stories and characters that are the aspiration of what our true core beliefs are and what we wish the world could be.
Yeah.
That's kind of always why I've pulled towards Superman, is because it's interesting to see when people talk about like which superhero they relate to. Like, oh, I relate to Batman because he's a normal person, and I'm like, no, I kind of I like Superman, and I feel like I relate to Superman a lot, and not because of the powers, but just the perspective on life.
Mhm.
My daughter, who's sitting next to me right now, has asked me before, like, why Superman's my favorite. And I said, when I was little, yeah, it's the powers, but as I grow up, it's the person, it's the personality, it's the character. There's been great stories about Superman losing his powers, but still striving to do what's right and stand up for, the people. And I recently changed positions at work, but I was working as an ongoing CPS caseworker. And on my door, I had a little thing that said, Superman was adopted. And then I also had inside my office was like, it just said, the never ending fighting for the never ending the battle, truth and justice.
Mm.
Because it is so permeated in just everything we do. And
For sure. Totally agree about that. Well, I feel grateful to be able to have you as a conversation partner this week as we as we talk about things like Superman and spirituality together. And I'm grateful that you found that, because I think David and I both wanted it to be that kind of place. And even releasing the podcast on Substack, my hope is that we will continue to have people who would dialogue along with us, even if they're not necessarily on the show, but they can write in comments, because I do think I feel that same way sometimes, where the conversations I want to have go a little deeper than just what I get at the comic shop, but also honestly sometimes deeper than what I would get in religious environments. And so trying to combine the conversation in a safe, non-judgmental space where we can have conversations. And I subscribe to Carl Rogers, the psychologist's view of unconditional positive regard when it comes to being with other people, because I think that's one of the few ways that we can actually actually be ourselves
Be
with each
effective.
other and grow. Yeah. And so I appreciate that. So thank you for being a conversation partner with us in these early days of our new podcast.
Oh, it's not a problem. I find it interesting because, you know, I've heard other people talk like, you know, I have a friend that I've talked to on this show and I listen to his podcast and he's a movie critic and he's, you know, he's Muslim and he's talked about like how Superman, you know, inspires. And he's like, it's not religion. It's just, you know, the character. And, and I think, and I wrote a piece for the Daily Planet. If you guys don't realize, there actually is a Daily Planet website run by my friend Zach Benz. It's dailyplanetdc.com.
That's
And years
great.
ago, I wrote an article that talked about like why I always wear my Superman shirts. And a lot of it is because it's an image. I feel like a lot of times with what you wear, you're representing your beliefs and who you are, and you're putting something into the world. And, um, you know, we can be different religions and we will fight over religion, but no one's really fighting over like Superman. And as dumb as it sounds, you know, the idea that there's core values that everybody can adjust to this character
Mm-hmm.
and it can represent something for every religion and every person compared to like if I wore a shirt with a cross on it, you know, sad to say there are people who've been traumatized by the church and like even though like I claim to be Christian, but I don't like being labeled because I feel like I'd rather have an open dialogue and discussion with people about what that means to me, you know, compared to what they might think it means because, you know, I've grown up different churches, different environments, and every experience has been different. And at the end of the day, people are people and will still, no matter what their beliefs are, will still act in self-interest. But
Tyler, may I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to restate what I heard you say, and I want you to tell me whether or not I've got it right. So I have a friend who's a member of the Sikh religion, and I asked him one time about the head covering that he wears, because as you know, Sikh men wrap their heads, and his answer was very interesting to me. I don't know that it is universal understanding among Sikhs, but this was how he understood it. He said, I wear this head covering so that when I'm in a crowd, if someone is in danger, they know that they can run to me and they will be safe. I will keep them safe. And what I'm hearing you saying is that you have a similar philosophy for why you wear your Superman t-shirts. In some way, you want to communicate that these are the values of care and protection that you want to embody, and you're making a visual statement of that. I also heard you say that even though we wish the cross would be that kind of symbol, that there are circumstances and situations that have made the cross not be quite that same kind of symbol of you can run to this and be protected. I just want to check in. Did I hear all that correctly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so can you tell me a little bit more about how you see the Superman symbol embodying those values? I'd love to hear about that from you.
Well, like for me, like you know, Superman's a universal idea of someone that's gonna love, protect, and be your friend. I mean, you know, isn't they always say like, I always think about Superman the movie, the line where Lois Lane says, "He's Superman. He's everybody's friend." You know, and I want that like no matter your beliefs or your way of life, like you're still a person that has value, and we can disagree on things, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't find some sort of shelter, protection, or some sort of conversational comfort around me. You know, history is full of people being persecuted by symbolism and certain, you know, even church organizations. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because I have a story to share with you guys with Rick later. If David, you're not still part of this about Christian music, but I just feel the Superman symbol should be something that's pure and that just, even though it's fiction, it's still a symbol that is created to represent truth and justice for all people.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I think that resonates strongly. I mean, I've had enough conversations with Rick to imagine that I speak for both of us when I say that this has been a kind of North Star for both of us for most of our lives. And not, again, like you said so well earlier, maybe early on because of the powers, but very quickly because of the character. And by that, I don't just mean the fictional character. I mean the quality of character, the moral qualities that were there. So I couldn't agree more.
But what about you guys? Like, what was it that really brought you to this character? Like, what appeals to it for you?
Well, for me, I think it goes back to my childhood. I'm continually trying to find ways to connect with my child self each day in a way that I think part of it for me forms out of Jesus' words of the gospel of you must become like little children to enter the kingdom of God. So if I think back to my childhood, some of my best memories and things that shaped me were Superman. And whether it would be watching Super Friends on Saturday morning, or I remember very clearly on I think I was 6 years old. I know I was first grade. So whatever age I was at that time, I remember getting in my stocking rolled up DC Comics presents Superman and Santa Claus, the comic book, which is still one of my favorites. It just kind of takes me back to this wonderful imaginative place, and even the story itself, you're left kind of wondering, was this a real story, or is this all in a dream and imagination that happened? So it really helped me with my imagination at a young age. But then I think because I came to enjoy Superman so much early, in this age where we have so many anti-heroes, it seems like there's nobody
Mhm.
that seems to have a pure motive. Like to me, I don't really enjoy watching something like Peacemaker nearly as much from James Gunn as I do his Superman, partially not because James Gunn isn't a brilliant writer, but I look at Superman as the more aspirational character, the one that I would hope
Mhm.
I would strive to be. I don't know that I live up to that all the time, but I look at the way that he once, I wish I could remember the comic it is right now, but there's one I think it's Superman and Batman are talking, and Batman says something about Lex Luthor says to say hi, and Superman's like, really? And Batman's like, no. but there's like this hope in him that he wants to love his enemies too, which is a really beautiful sentiment. I think it's not that he wants to crush everyone. He actually believes in the redemption of people. And when I watch shows when I feel like he's been best written as a character, he embodies that. My wife and I are rewatching the Superman and Lois TV series, and there's even a line that he says to one of the characters that was formerly a villain but is becoming less so through the story, and he's questioning why Superman is doing that, and his response is because everyone's worth saving. I've told you that before. And so I
Yep.
love that ideal that we would strive for. So it helps me and feeds my imagination in those good ways that I want to be. I know that I don't always live up to those ideals, but in the world, I think we will have enemies, which is a very interesting thing. You were saying that you're wearing that shirt embodies that you want to be a friend to everyone. I love that sentiment because there are times when people will choose to be our enemies, whether we want them to be or not. However, that doesn't mean that we can't approach them in a way as though they were not the enemy, as a way that if we refuse to have enemies, then it's kind of impossible to have them. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting the way that Superman approaches that, even in the worst villains, it seems like. And I love even in the James Gunn movie, like he wants to put that giant monster in a intergalactic zoo somewhere. He doesn't want to kill it. He wants to find a way to still bring redemption in that process. So that's one thing that I guess as an adult that I love about the character. And he's a great paradigm to look at a lot of different things through that are just real life things. It just makes it a little easier sometimes to talk about, and maybe with something that is fiction. But as we talked about on the podcast we just recorded together, there are stories that are true that never happened. And this is one of those stories it's a true story, even if it didn't really happen, with Superman.
It's a good perspective.
For me, we can all think of powerful people in our lives or in our experience that have acted callously or without regard for others. And the thing that has always fascinated me about Superman is, and think about the first couple title cards of the recent James Gunn version, where Superman is defined as the most powerful metahuman. All right, so this is a character who has the capacity for extraordinary destructive power. And so his entire existence has been an existence of self-limitation. And in theology, we have a fancy word for that. We use the word kenosis, which means self-emptying. And so in theology, we say, yes, Jesus was God, and yet Jesus didn't have all of the powers of God when Jesus was in the incarnation walking among us. Jesus had some of the powers, but not all of them. Jesus exercised some of the wisdom, but not all of it. Jesus exercised some of the spiritual gifts, but not all of them. And so it's very similar to me with Superman, that Superman could just take whatever he wanted and do whatever he wanted. He could be the perfect capitalist, or he could be the perfect version of like Imperial America. But he doesn't choose to be the perfect version of Imperial America. If you go back, especially to the radio show from the 1930s and 40s, he embodies instead the perfect versions of democratic America, where everyone is welcome, where we're not going to use our powers indiscriminately, but instead, even though we have great power, and I'm now talking both about Superman and America, or Superman and those that have resources, the choice to not simply do something because you can, but rather to recognize that your actions, however small, have dynamic consequences in the lives of others. And especially as you gain more resources and more power, that those consequences grow exponentially. And so the thing that fascinates me about Superman is he's constantly thinking about that, and that actually becomes his greatest strength, because every fight that you get into with Superman, he's going to make sure it's a fair fight, which is weird, right? Like, he could overpower everybody, but he chooses not to, which is why sometimes he loses, but he loses for the best possible reasons. It's the best of all democratic impulses, as far as I'm concerned. So there's a lot there, but that's, as I've gotten older and I've sort of lost the romance of he can fly, the thing that really keeps bringing me back is the moments when Superman is in a pickle because he has chosen not to be the most powerful version of himself, but instead the most relational version of himself.
Or, with that same sentiment, is like not opposing, quote unquote, his will on somebody. Like, and I do always like when Superman is shown like as a helper. He's, there to assist and not dictate. And but I just, like, you guys use the word aspirational, and I think it was a couple years ago I did a panel at Cincinnati Comic Expo, and that was the center was like of it was Superman as the aspirational figure, and the the core values of what he tries to do. And if you guys remember, one of my favorite is the Superman Shazam versus Black Adam short. There's a scene where Clark Kent's sitting talking to Billy Batson, and he's talking about being good is hard, and I've actually used that same kind of speech with my son. My son is 10 years old, and he's dealing with a lot right now, changes because he's in 5th grade, but where we live, 5th grade is now, his school system is part of middle school. So there's a big shift that's happened, and, he's very emotional, mature, and he's very emotionally depth. For his age and just him, and his name is Solomon, and he is very aptly named. And he, I use that speech with him, like kind of that, like the idea of, you deal with bullies, you deal with kids that are rude and that are immature, but being good and being the bigger man is hard. Like, it takes a lot to do that than it is to just be angry and violent, and unemotionally controlled. And and I've looked at Superman writers. Like, some of my favorite Superman writers is actually J. Michael Straczynski. He did the Superman Grounded run, and one of my all-time favorite Superman books and moments is in his run, and it's often overlooked. It's when the woman is on the ledge and she wants to jump, and Superman tells her, like, look, I promise you, if, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, basically tells her, if this is what you choose to do, if you can tell me that you believe that you will never have another happy day or anything, I won't catch you. Like, and I've used a version of that speech and that conversation with kids on my caseload who are self-harming and who are, just in a horrible position in life because of what they've been granted, what they've been dealt, and just the idea that, are you truly at this place? So I think Superman, the character, and for the people who write Superman, it gives you a chance to talk about morality. Was it Elias Magnin talked about every Superman story is a morality tale? And the idea that we can talk about things that are just moral without having to deal with the religious aspect, because too often do we use our religious beliefs to base our morality on, and then it gets mucky, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. That's a good point. I like that run too. I love that you like the grounded run because it seems like that's not a very well loved storyline by Joe Michael Straczynski, but I think it's very good.
If I remember right, he left because I read it in the trades. I like reading a lot of times trades. So like volume 1 is very solid. I think he left during volume 2, and I think that's where it's been a while since I've read volume 2, and that's where it got a little lost. But
yeah. And if I'm remembering it correctly, because I read it when it first came out, but Grounded, he decides he's become, if memory serves, he's become too disconnected from mankind, and so he chooses to walk around. It might be the whole world, I can't remember, but it's at least like throughout part of the U.S. He's not going to fly. He's going to be with people. He's choosing to be very present, and so he walks through these neighborhoods. You come across places where I remember one part of the storyline dealt with a husband who is physically abusing his wife, and Superman stepping in the midst of that, things that he might not have seen if he was just up in the sky, things that he wouldn't have been able to connect with children in the same way, wouldn't have been able to connect with people on the street. And but that's one thing I really loved about that storyline, which is the thing that it seemed like a lot of people didn't like about the storyline, because they wanted him to be up in the air and away from things and being this godlike character, and he was choosing above his own free will to come down to everyone else's level, which is sort of what David was talking about too. I think with he makes the fight even, he kind of puts everybody on level ground with him, and that's an exceptional bow for a person with power to make. I think we don't see it very often in our world, and if we just think of whether we could debate whether or not political power is actually real power or not. But a lot of people sure think it is. And it's very rare to see someone of a high political stature in our world that would just say, you know what, I'm not gonna live in my mansion. I'm gonna live in the slums and be among people who I'm actually supposed to be serving, and to get to know them, love them well. And I think that's what we're getting in that storyline. It's kind of why I like it so much.
Three thoughts on that. One, I come from a Catholic background, and our recently deceased Pope Francis, would continually say to the other bishops in the Catholic Church, "You are shepherds who must smell like the sheep. You are shepherds who must smell like the sheep. You have to get out among the people. You can't be removed. You can't be effective ministers if you're not actually engaged in the day-to-day life of the people that are suffering." And when Pope Francis spoke to the United Nations, this is the second point, back in 2015, he used a phrase that has really been a kind of beacon phrase for me. He says, those of us with means, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, those of us with means must support the poor in becoming the dignified agents of their own destiny, and that destiny cannot be imposed by us. In other words, they have to choose their own paths, even if they're paths that we wouldn't necessarily approve of. And that's that moment on the ledge with Superman saying, you have the agency here to choose your future. And if you're gonna choose a kind of future that is no future, I'm gonna trust that you're making the best decision that you can. And that to me is a really amazing moment, because when we allow other people to actually have their agency and to actually, and this is in the work that you're describing, Tyler, when you actually step back and say, I'm not going to make the choices for you, I'm going to support you in making the best choices that you can, we enter into a realm, and this is the third point, that can be called harm reduction, where we're not imposing our will on someone, but rather we're trying to make sure that they make the best possible choices that they can at that moment. Maybe not the best choices ever, but the best possible choices that they can at that moment so that they can survive long enough to make better choices tomorrow. And that is, I think that's a fundamental sort of background to what we're talking about here in the way that Superman is choosing to, has been communicated, and as a character is, to the extent we can say a character is choosing anything, is choosing to live, or at least has been written in that way to sort of evoke these kinds of thoughts and questions.
Very well put.
See, every time David talks, I learn something. So it's our podcast is just a chance for me to just gain from David's wisdom, I think, to be honest with you.
Well, and I would say our podcast is just a chance for me to have great conversations with Rick where I learn a ton too. So it goes both ways. Absolutely. And I'm learning from you, Tyler, in this conversation as well. And I'm very grateful for that.
Indeed. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, Rick, with your position as a chaplain, like I know that at one point my brother, like I said, he got a degree in youth ministry, had looked at being a chaplain in the military. And as a chaplain in a hospital, how does that work as far as dealing with people of other faiths compared to your own? Are you working with just people with a similar faith? You know, like David said, he came from a Catholic background, and I get really frustrated with I won't say any names, but people in my life who look at their denomination specifically as the correct version of Christianity, and that all other denominations are wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I get so frustrated. Like you guys can't see it, but on my left arm, I have a very large tattoo of the 3 crosses, and it's very evident of what the 3 crosses are. And you know, I've been at home and people have come, you know, the door-to-door people.
Tyler, you cut out on my end. I don't know if something happened.
Yeah,
you're
it
back
glitched
now.
on it.
Sorry.
You know, I've spoken with the door-to-door people with that arm receiving their materials, and you know, it's interesting how they still, instead of just being like, okay, we're on the same team, we're just kind of playing different positions. Yeah. They're like, well, I'm going to continue to speak to you about my viewpoint and my church and this, instead of just being like, okay, we're both working different ways, spreading the same message. Yeah. So how do you work in your position, Rick, with that kind of ideas?
Well, part of being a chaplain in healthcare, one thing that we do, which is very interesting, which kind of transformed my view of ministry, and I think in a wonderful way, but really in some ways, I think I would call it my repenting of the way I did Christianity for a while, because if repentance really is this turning around in our understanding, I was challenged early on by one of my teachers in my clinical pastoral education, who asked me a question about, do you want to have others see Jesus in you as you serve them, or do you want to see Jesus in them? And it was a great question, and it threw me off guard whenever it was asked to me. And it was in an interview process, actually. And I kind of, which is great when somebody, you know, I was trying to get into the residency program, and it just threw my footing completely off because I had to stop and think. I didn't have a good answer. And then they explained to me, they said, well, you know, you profess to be a Christian. So Matthew 25, Jesus says there's this parable of the sheep and the goats, that whatever you do, the least of these, whenever you run into another person, whenever, especially those who are impoverished and in need and who are weary and in prison and sick, the task is not for them to see Jesus in you. The task is that you would see Jesus in them for whatever you did or whatever you did not do for them. You were doing or not doing for me. And chaplaincy, in many ways, I think I would describe it as I am a witness. However, I think the definition of witness has changed for me. My job as a chaplain is not to witness to them, but to be a witness of them. And we even have one of the founders of healthcare chaplaincy, really probably the founder, honestly, Anton Boyson. He used to call people living human documents, saying, I don't want you to look at the chart. I want you to look at the person. I want you to hear their story. I want you to hear their pains, their anguishes, their joys. What are they suffering in? What are they rejoicing in? What is meaningful, what gives them value, what gives them purpose. And so my task as a hospital chaplain is a lot less about speaking into a situation, and it is much more about receiving from the person in front of me, which sometimes is very well, it's always interesting, I will say that, but sometimes it transforms me in ways that I didn't realize it would. And it almost feels selfish sometimes to me, because I feel like I'm going in and being changed in beautiful ways by people, and their stories. And so people of other faiths, other religions, that's another opportunity for me to learn from them,
Mhm.
and to see Jesus behind their eyes. Because if I profess to be a Christian, and I hope I am, I hope others would say that. I love the way David phrases it sometimes. If I try not to call myself a Christian, I want other people to be able to affirm that in me, and hopefully I am living that out. But I have seen Jesus show up in so many hospital rooms behind so many people's faces, people who don't even profess Christianity, but I've seen Jesus in that space behind their eyes, hearing their stories. And we find that everybody, as we have said already, is human, and everybody has an important story to share. And I'm just going to refer back to one of my heroes, Mr. Rogers, again, which we briefly talked about, who says that there's practically no one you couldn't love once you hear their story. And so that's
Amen.
in a short nutshell, of a broad thing that chaplains do. That's kind of how I see my task as a chaplain, and hopefully I do that in life too. I look at even my ministry in churches when I speak, or when I'm invited to do a concert. I try to look at it in that way too, that my task is not so much to spend all the time making all the noise, but to actually listen and hear the people I'm with.
That's beautiful. You know, it reminds me of one of my favorite classes when I was in school was personal evangelism. And the class basically, you boil it down to, was just how to be a friend to somebody and let your life and the person that you are be the guiding direction without having, too many times I get frustrated with, I want to say, the Christian community of people who kind of force evangelize or force instead of just letting people come to them, learning and just observing.
Mm,
They're like, it's so prevalent just from the moment they say hi, it's already like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. And it's just like, to me, I feel like that's disrespectful to a person because you
mm,
don't know their life. But hey,
mm,
just tell me your story. Let's get to know each other as who we are. Um, and then if it comes up naturally, that's the way to just talk about it in a conversation without, me walking up. Oh, hi, Rick. Nice to meet you. Let me tell you about Jesus.
yeah. 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 That can be awkward for sure.
And I think that's the problem is so many people have made it awkward that it's hard sometimes to have a genuine conversation because as soon as you start to talk about anything, people have their blockers on, and you can't have just open dialogue about something like this
Mhm,
because of what they've been conditioned to. But I wanted to ask, you talked about being a musician and everything.
mhm.
Um, I have my own personal battle with Christian music, quote unquote. I was in a Christian rock band. We went to Nashville to record, and we were working on our first EP, uh, professionally. And we had recorded four songs, and all four of those songs appear on a different group's album
Hmm.
because they basically were taking out from underneath us and through some shady
Oh,
business deals sold to another band to re-record and release, and we spent 6 years in court. And it
wow.
was one of those things that just really show that no matter the labels that people put on themselves, and uh, what I find ironic is one of the people of that other band is now facing a lot of backlash as a lot of truth about their behavior has come out recently in
Mm,
the world and in the Christian community. And I think that's where it goes back to, we put labels on people expecting expectations.
hmm.
and people will let us down and do, like I said, back to self-serving selfishness. And that's why I think the best way to administer anything is people getting to know you one-on-one, your personal actions, and how living out your beliefs. Like if I tell you something, like, I'm gonna live it out. Like I'm not flawless, I'm not uptight, quote unquote, Christian person. I slip up. I'll use sometimes what we refer to adult words, with our kids. But I don't condemn myself or other people for using that. I won't do it on my podcast because I don't believe that that's something I should be conveying. I want this Superman podcast, even though as dumb as it sounds, to be accessible to all ages at all times. But I feel like we limit ourselves by trying to put ourselves in these boxes of what is and what isn't with our spirituality. And we put conditions on other people when they claim to be something. Like, oh, I'm a Christ follower, I'm a Christian. All of a sudden, just saying that, you've now put expectations on somebody.
Yeah. And frankly, the expectation is not always a good one. Whenever we use labels like that, I know I just personally, when I walk into a room, oftentimes if they see my badge that says chaplain, sometimes the conversation is already done. And I have to do a little work to even be able to stay in the room sometimes, because nobody has to have me there. But they have in their mind a vision of what Christianity is, which is interesting because we serve all faiths and all beliefs and no beliefs at all. We are there, as I said, to be a witness to them and what they are going through and help them make connections that they need. But it's interesting. That's a very difficult thing to realize sometimes, that maybe I don't want to wear that label because the label has been tarnished so badly. However, that's where we are. That can be the state of things sometimes, but I'd still, personally, I still wear the chaplain badge because I want to show what a chaplain is in the midst, and as we did today, explain a little bit of what a chaplain does. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to share about that side of what I do Monday through Friday.
Quick question: are you guys MASH fans?
I have watched a lot of MASH, but not recently. Yeah, I've seen a lot of reruns though.
One of the advantages of being 54 years old is MASH was everywhere when I was a kid, and so I'm familiar with it because of that. And I have definitely watched a lot of episodes, but I have not paid serious attention to it for probably more than 2 decades.
It's one of those shows that I just remember being sick and staying home from school, and it was being on FX all the time. And as I got older, just really dialing into it, and I feel like when you get into later seasons, when it becomes more of a dramedy, and it brings up a lot of moral questions, and even with the humors, I was just thinking about, like, Rick, I kind of see you a lot like Father Mulcahy. If you guys ever get a chance to go back, like every year I watch every Christmas I watch the Christmas episodes. I think they're some of the most best written episodes, and so I revisit those every year. But I kind of see it like that, where you look at like that character and their experience, where sometimes they don't want him around because of how they see him, but then him explaining what his purpose is being there, even amongst like the doctors and everything. I think it's a strong message. But
yeah. Well, no, thank you for that. I'll have to go back and rewatch some episodes. I'm familiar with Father Mulcahy, but I probably didn't pay a lot of attention to him when I was watching it the first time. I was always more enamored with Hawkeye, for sure.
Yeah, Hawkeye's the best.
Groucho Marx like sense of humor,
And then, of course, Superman connection. BJ Honeycutt went on to voice Pa Kent in the animated series.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I watched the Justice League Christmas Comfort and Joy every Christmas as well. One of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, can I ask just real quick out of,
Sure.
I know, David, you had a time you needed to leave. Are we still okay on time for you?
I've got about 10 more minutes. I can stay in the conversation.
Very good. All
right. Why don't we just go ahead, David, and let you say some things that are on your mind, and we can just kind of wrap up here in the next 10 minutes. That way we're not holding anybody up.
Well, I just want to say again how much I am learning from this conversation. As you both know, the corpus of Superman material is so vast that there's always pieces that I haven't read or encountered or thought about. And so my areas of expertise, I know the movies really well. I know some of the TV shows really well because I was an absolute fanatic about Smallville. But the other place where I really have done a lot of kind of focused attention is with the Superman radio show. And Rick and I have talked a little bit about this, how pivotal that radio show was in defining some of the, not only the characteristics, but the powers of Superman, both as a superhero, but also as a moral character. You may have seen the meme go around where there's the cartoon of Superman surrounded by an extraordinary variety of different types of people and sort of speaking up for the best qualities of America being the qualities of acceptance of difference. Well, that didn't start on the comic book panel, although it definitely has been reflected there. It really started in many ways in that radio show, and you can find entire storylines that span multiple weeks where Superman is battling against not some kind of super villain, but the simple everyday villains that we encounter that want to make our imaginations smaller. And if listeners are looking for a great storyline to start with, go to the Superman radio show and look up the storyline that's called The Knights of the White Carnation, which is a sort of veiled analog of the Ku Klux Klan, and the ways that they are distributing materials in schools, trying to turn athletes against other athletes of color and things like that. So Superman and Clark Kent as characters have been sort of embodying this wide welcome, this hospitality, this we can all fit and we can all matter for a long, long time. It's one of the things I love the most about the character, and especially at times like this when so many forces are arraying to try and make us go at each other's throats. I really return to some of the wisdom that Clark Kent, the character in the radio show, was saying to Jimmy Olsen and other young people that he was interacting with, that it doesn't have to be like this. We can find a different way to be, again, to use that wonderful word from Mr. Rogers, to be neighborly with one another. And so for me, I mean, if I have, 5 minutes to talk about Superman, which you've just given me, and I'm thankful for that, I'm going to talk about not him flying, not how powerful he is, but rather the compassion, the welcome, the hospitality, and the extraordinary variety that he welcomes and embodies.
Real quick, David, favorite live action version of Superman? Go.
Smallville. The first seasons of Smallville really, for me, are definitional. I really like the way that the writers, particularly in the first several seasons, had the kind of no flights, no tights rule, and they were really going to focus on the moral development of Superman as a human being, and as figuring out why is it that when he actually does put on the cape, he's not like Lex Luthor, he's not like Homelander, but instead he is a person who really gravitates towards this extraordinary hospitality. And I think those early versions of Smallville do that so well. And I moved mountains because I didn't have a TV at the time. I was in graduate school when that show was on, and I moved mountains to watch that show every week, to the point where I would have a friend tape it for me, and I'd go to the library and I'd watch the videotape every week at certain times, just because I was so eager to keep up with the show. I love that show so much.
That's amazing.
All right, Rick, your favorite live action version?
Boy, that's a tricky question. I really am enjoying Tyler Hoechlin's. My wife and I are rewatching all 4 seasons right now. She hasn't seen all the episodes, but I have, and I really like the way he portrays both Clark and Superman. I mean, the argument could probably be made. He's as much like Superman when he's Clark as he is when he's Superman, and it's a little bit like they play them totally different. But it reminds me a little bit of George Reeves, who is one of also my favorite live action ones, partially because the Clark Kent character is I think, just as heroic as Superman is, throughout that show. And I tend to like that a little more. I love Christopher Reeve, but I don't always like, as the years have gone by, I've less liked his portrayal of Clark Kent, just because I think Clark can be a little more Superman-like than what he often is portrayed. I understand why they made the choices they did, and I don't dislike it at all. And Christopher Reeves is always going to have a very special place in my heart for sure. But yeah, right now, depending on the day, it can change. But I think right now, Tyler is one of my favorites. And by the way, I will be. We go every year to Cincinnati Comic Expo, and so I'm going to be there this year too with my son, hoping to get to meet Tyler this year. So, Tyler and Tyler.
We'll stay in contact, because I was actually talking, because every year I do a panel there at that comic, but I didn't do it last year, and they moved their locations, and I was told this year they're not sure if they're going to have open panel submissions.
Okay.
Because I kept waiting to apply for it because of the size and limitations. So I was like, well, dang, because I had a really
space
good
is an issue.
Panel set up for this year, and I also applied to do GalaxyCon in Columbus and Motor City in November.
Nice.
Because taking my Superman message on the road. But I want to thank both you guys for being here today. I know David's got to go. Just give short, quick plugs for you guys' show and where people can find you if they want to engage with you online. We'll start with David.
Yeah, David, do you want to say anything about the show? Or
Sure. So so you can. Actually, Rick, I think you probably know most of the details much better in hand than I do. So why don't you go ahead and give that plug?
Sure. Well, the always Twitter in my heart, but the X page. If you look up Rick Lee James 4, or you can look up Superman Always. The Superman Always hashtag, I couldn't get that one exactly, but you would be able to find it under my name. And there is a link there that takes you right to our Substack page where I release episodes when they come out. Or if you have a Substack account already and you just want to look up Truth, Justice, and the Way, Superman and Spirituality, that's probably one of the best ways to listen and to interact with us. But the podcast is available. It's called Truth, Justice, and the Way, Superman and Spirituality. And it's on, I believe, every major podcast outlet at this point. So whether that be Spotify or iTunes or YouTube, you should be able to find it. And we would love to have everyone listening. Please be a conversation partner with us. It's small but growing, and I'm grateful for that. I like kind of growing things from the ground up. We did that with our Mr. Rogers show together, and now all the 80,000 followers or whatever we have over on Twitter on that Mr. Rogers page, it's always a fun place to get to interact. And we're hoping that Superman, it's not really about the number of followers, but we would love to have quality interactions with people. And if there's anything that is inspiring to listeners, or anything that you'd like us to talk about, we're always looking for more. And I personally would love, as we continue the episode on, maybe we could bring some other guests on, especially from other faiths, because spirituality is so much more vast than just the Christianity and the background that I come from, and the Catholicism that David comes from. And we learn things from each other in beautiful ways. And there are always perspectives that we don't hold that someone else does that would be able to help us grow. And we want to continue to nurture that kind of environment together. So
the best kind of environment.
But thank you for having both of us today. This is so great.
Yeah, Tyler, thank you so much. It's great to get to know you and great to get to know your show. Thank you again for this opportunity.
You're welcome. It's been a long time coming, fellas. I think, best to both you guys and your faith, and I look forward to your show and just your life in general and the mission and the personal goals. Best of luck to both of you.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, check out their show, and remember. All right, guys, that was good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope that you have a good rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
I plan on just going home and chilling with the kiddos after they finish up here with their grief counseling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're downstairs doing that.
Look up in the sky, the birds,